So 5 years ago, I received a sign that I'm kind of a big deal. But before you think I'm some type of raging egomaniac, it was literally a sign that I received from my brother on Christmas. So this was during my freshman year of college, right in the middle, and it was the first time in my life that I had actually started to achieve enough to feel like a big deal. I had just gotten my first 4.0, I was president of Student Government's freshman council, and the vice president of my dorm, and the campus coordinator of the Ready for Hillary PAC. So as all of this was happening, I felt this surge of confidence. So the present for these reasons was both quirky and fitting. And this sign has come with me from desk to desk, from my first 2 years at CU Boulder to Providence, Rhode Island when I transferred to Brown, to now at my adult desk at my home in Denver. Through the times that I felt like a really big deal and times I felt like the furthest from one. The waves of insecurity and confidence. The never-ending battle between big and small. So 80% of women report feeling as though they aren't good enough. And despite my own best attempts at feeling confidence to my core, I often find that I'm one with this percentage. But what does the term good enough even mean? Good tends to imply some type of morality and lives in duality to the word bad, and on a whole doesn't quite describe the type of universal inadequacy that people often feel. So the term that feels closest to what people often feel is not big enough. If you've ever had one of those big dreams or visions that you want so badly for your life, and you feel like it's Mount Everest, right? And you're standing at the base, you're looking up at it, and you're wondering, how do I take that first step to get there? It feels so much bigger than what we are. I also see it like in the Goldilocks story, which if we're talking about morality has some fuzzy lines, but remember there's 3 chairs, all for the bears, and she comes up onto them. And the first chair is Big Bear's chair, and this chair is too small. And if you've ever sat in a chair that's too small for you, it's really uncomfortable, you feel like you're gonna fall out of the chair, you're gonna break it. And oftentimes we find ourselves in situations that we know that we're bigger than. We know that we're selling ourselves short. Whether it be a job that we've outgrown, a relationship, a way of thinking, we know we need to get out of the small chair. And one of my favorite stories about someone who knew that they were in a situation that was too small for them is the story of Oprah when she was a young girl growing up in Mississippi. And her grandmother was teaching her how to wash clothes, and she said, "Watch closely because you're going to be doing this for a long time." And Oprah recalls feeling as though she was bigger than what Mississippi thought of her. Then there's the Papa Bear's chair, and this chair is too big. And if you've ever been to one of those hotels or amusement parks that has one of those big whimsical chairs, you know what I mean when I say you only get up there for a photo op, and you need help on the way up, and you need help on the way down, and you never want to be in a big chair where your feet are dangling because you feel like everybody can tell it's too big for you. Whenever I've talked about this notion of not feeling big enough with other women, they often talk about this big chair as the imposter syndrome. So you know when you get that promotion or you have that achievement or that award and you feel like everybody can tell that you're too small for the chair that you're sitting in. You're an imposter. Those feet are dangling. But how do we figure out our relation to each of these chairs, what they mean to us, or how big or small we believe that we are? During my time at Brown, I studied the theory of self-agency for my honors thesis on how women develop their sense of self-agency in entrepreneurship and venture capital. And the crutch for my thesis was self-agency from Dr. Sharon Krause's book, Freedom Beyond Sovereignty. And I had read the book in my junior year of college, and I loved it because it was the first book that really helped me shape my understanding of how I've crafted myself in relation to the world. And Dr. Sharon Krause happened to be a professor at Brown, so she was also my thesis advisor. So without getting too technical, the theory asserts that ever since we were born, we have had these interactions and encounters with the world that have taught us something about ourselves through their perceptions of them. So say that in 3rd grade, a boy calls you stupid in math class, or in middle school, your teacher said you were the best writer in class. Well, your perception of how those situations have led you to view yourself cause you to act again in a different way. They impact you. They impact your self-agency. So upon hearing someone thinks you're stupid, maybe next time the teacher says, "Who knows the answer to this question?" you don't want to raise your hand, you hesitate. And maybe after the time that your middle school teacher tells you you're the best writer in class, you attack your next essay assignment with more fervor and confidence than ever before. However, Harvard Business School recently did a study that found that when women apply for managerial positions and are rejected, they're actually 1.5 times more likely than their male counterparts to internalize their rejection and never apply for a position of the same caliber again at any other company, even if the reason they didn't get the job in the first place had nothing to do with them or their qualifications. So this suggests that women are more likely to internalize their perceptions of these negative experiences of self-agency. So what accomplishments do you feel like you can accomplish? What big chair do you have your eye on? Maybe it's the biggest of the big chairs, something so few people do, like winning the Nobel Peace Prize or becoming president of the United States. Or maybe it's a smaller and more cozy chair, like graduating from high school. But whatever you think, it's all a result of what you've been taught to believe about yourself and how you've perceived those experiences. So chances are you view yourself as much smaller than you actually are. So when I returned to my the end of my freshman year of college, I was obsessed with becoming a big deal. And the problem here is that for everything you can accomplish, there's always one way to outperform yourself, right? For every goal you can achieve, there's always one goal that's more shinier and vibrant in the distance. And there's always going to be a bigger chair. But I was yet to figure this out. So I started to strive to do not only well in my classes, but to get a 100% on every exam. And as a result, I became incredibly anxious. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and I even couldn't go to my economics final because I had a tidal wave of unbearable panic at the thought of not knowing the answer to a single question. In the midst of all of this, I was nominated for the Student of the Year award, which I thought was a pretty big deal, and I wanted this with everything in me. And I prayed for it, and I wished for it, and I said it as my affirmation every single morning. And then the day of the banquet arrived, and they called my name, and I had won. And I remember hearing my name called, walking up to receive the award, posing for a photo, and going back to sit in my chair that was supposed to be now so much bigger, and staring at the award on the table that was engraved with my name and desperately trying to feel something, but I felt nothing. So Tal Ben-Shahar is the author of a book called Happier, and he taught the class on how to be happy at Harvard, which is one of the most popular classes ever taught at Harvard, and he talks about this principle called the arrival fallacy. So when we're going after a goal, we aren't going after it thinking, oh, I really hope I get it. We're going after it believing in our head and our heart that we've already arrived there. So if the moment of arrival actually comes and we get to the goal, we feel nothing. We've already felt every positive emotion associated with getting the goal and the pursuit of it. And so we feel exactly as I had felt staring at this award. So I knew that there was no external validation that could fill me, and I needed to figure out something else. And I was lost on this. But then the unexpected happened, and I had an idea. So in my Women in Leadership class, we had just read the book I Am Malala, which is the autobiography of Malala Yousafzai. And I was struck by the part in the book when she comes back to her home, and her hometown has been ravaged by the Taliban who came through. And there were fires, and she didn't know if the books that she had hid in her closet were okay. And she runs with desperation to the closet, and she finds that they are okay, and she is exuberated and so relieved. And I remember that my professor said, imagine how she viewed those books as if they were gold. And I realized that tears were streaming down my face. I did not understand in the race against myself how someone could feel such deep love and satisfaction for something like a book, right? Something they already had. So my idea became to donate books to girls around the world, because no accomplishment could satisfy me. The idea of putting books in the girls' hands around the world did. And with the continual support and urging from my mom, we took the idea further, and I would donate books that would empower girls, and I'd write a curriculum to go along with them, and they'd be donated in mentoring groups, so girls could come together and talk about the books. And the first book we donated was I Am Malala. So one may think that starting a nonprofit would just be another achievement, but think about it. I was venturing into a realm of complete uncertainty because I had no idea what I was doing. And I wasn't thinking about achievement, so I wasn't really thinking about failure either. And I so loved every day that I spent that summer, figuring it out as I went along, talking to anybody who would give me help, and depending upon the Google search bar. All these days that I spent in my childhood home or at the nearby coffee shop. But I didn't fully realize how much the experience of starting this nonprofit had helped me until I attended my first ever networking event at the Four Seasons in Denver the following fall. And I walk into the room, and I'm immediately intimidated and dismayed to find that the room is mostly filled with men, and that the only women in the room were really the wives and girlfriends of the male business owners. But I wanted to be confident, so I still struck up a conversation with an older man who, for the purposes of this story, we'll call Hugo. And Hugo was, in every sense of the word, bigger than me. He was taller, so I was peering up at him. He was older, by the looks of his suit, very wealthy. And as he told me about his business that he had worked on for 30 years, it was clear that he was much more experienced and successful. And then I told him about my humble idea of donating books to girls around the world mentoring groups, and he looks at me with this smirk of amusement, and he says, that is a tall order. As in a big order. As in a much bigger order than a small girl like me could fill. And this could have been one of those experiences that forever tarnished my view of myself and my company, right? But I knew in that moment that he was wrong. I knew that I was so much bigger than what he thought of me. So I looked back at him and I said, "You're right, it is a tall order. And I'm fulfilling my first international shipment right now," and I walked away. Now, it's not lost on me that just a few months prior, not even winning the Student of the Year award could make me feel like a big deal, and yet standing in the face of this man who was belittling me, I had never felt bigger. And I also think about Malala, who was raised in a society that taught her that not only could girls not learn, but they couldn't lead, and they didn't have a voice, that she still fought past all of that and everything she'd been taught about herself for a greater cause. And I've struggled to make sense of all of this because even when I was writing my thesis just 1 year ago, I didn't have a concrete recommendation for how someone could surpass the limits of their self-agency and still do something big in the world and still feel big enough despite all of it. And yet I never felt bigger. I felt as if I could hold the globe in the palm of my hand as my small but mighty nonprofit spread to the Philippines and ultimately to Pakistan, the same country where Malala had fought for girls' rights to education. And I wrote in each book that I donated, "You are without limits." Because to be without limits is to be the biggest of them all. So there's one chair we haven't talked about yet. It's the chair that Goldilocks ultimately chooses. See, she doesn't try to sit in Papa Bear's chair and say, like, "I'll grow into it." And she doesn't say about Mama Bear's chair, "Okay, this will fit for now, this works." She says something very specific. It's just right. This size is just right. And it is not until we feel as though the place that we currently are with what we're doing right now is just right that the other options fade away and there is no bigger chair. And once we're no longer looking outward, we can finally look inward. And once we look inward, we can ask ourselves in a quiet moment, what is it that I want to do with this one and only life that I've been given? And whenever I think of this question, I think of the fateful day that the Taliban boarded Malala's school bus armed and asked for her to identify herself as one who had fought for girls' rights to education. And she stood, knowing full and well of the danger, and she said, "I am Malala," and she was shot. What is it that you want to do with your life so much that you don't care if you never achieve? What is it that you would do if there was no way to be the biggest or the best and you would never receive any type of external validation for it? What would you do even if you had to lay down your life for it, if you didn't care that you had to die for it? The truth is that there is no way that you will ever feel big unless you feel big on your own. And the only way to feel big is to tap into something that is greater than us. It is not until we put our eyes on a bigger purpose that we can finally look away from the bigger chair. And it is not until we become service-based and think about how we can serve the world that we find that there's a bigness that's restored within us with unrelenting and unlimited energy, passion, and vision. And of course, Malala did go on to win the Nobel Peace Prize, and she's a household name, and she's achieved by every standard marker of achievement, but she never set out on her mission with this intention. Because achievement isn't an end goal. It's just somewhere that you might end up on your journey to being who you truly are in the world and serving your purpose. So here are a few ways that we can cultivate a sense of bigness here right now as we are, even if you don't yet have your big idea of how you're going to serve the world. And the first is that we can reframe how we talk about achievement. So many times when we think about achievement, we think of the list that we write of things we want to achieve one day. But if we instead ask, what is it that I want to help others achieve, we start to change that definition. And then we'll see that achievement is not a resume, it's a way in which we feel fulfilled, right? The second is that we have to take the emotional resonance out of the no. So achievement seekers, well, I know this firsthand, rejection's really hard. You do not want to ever get a no. So what if we lived life, even just for a month, in pursuit of the no, and did things expecting full and well to be rejected and cultivated a bravery from that, whether it's reaching out to a star celebrity for mentorship or even doing something that we've been told no for in the past. The third is that if we're naturally competitive or really ambitious, we can work it out in another way. Like we can try to run a 5K or do really well in spin class. The fourth is that we can change the way that we set goals for ourselves. And instead of them being numerical, have them more based on quality. So one of my goals is I want to find 1 hour every single day in the flow. Maybe for you, it's how you want to make people feel when you leave their presence, or how much you want to learn this year. And the last is to find quiet moments for creativity, because I really believe that when you tap into your creative power, that's when you're going to tap into your intuitive power of how you're going to serve the world. Because for so many of us, it's through creativity, through our ideas, through our art, etc. So set aside at least 1 hour for yourself a day, maybe a week if you're too busy, and just paint, sing, play around with a rendition of Drops of Jupiter on the guitar, and find that creative flow. So if you've been measuring yourself and coming up short, and wondering how big of a deal you really are, here, right now, is your sign. And it may not fit in your purse, and you may not be able to take it home with you, and it's definitely not a Christmas present because it's May, but I hope it carries the same power for you as it did for me. You're a big deal in your own unique way, not because of what you'll accomplish, although I know that you'll accomplish plenty, but because you carry a bigger than big purpose within you. And once you tap into that, you'll realize that your life was never about being bigger, but realizing that you are and have always been big enough. Thank you.